Let's talk about something we all think we know. Freedom is about having choices, lots of them. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the very thing that's supposed to empower us is actually making us miserable? Today, we are diving deep into the fascinating and frankly kind of mind-bending psychology behind the paradox of choice. I mean, this is basically the foundation of modern life, isn't it? The more options you have, the more freedom you have, and the happier you're supposed to be. Whether you're picking out a coffee or picking a career path, the assumption is always that a bigger menu is a better menu. But is it? Because here's where things get weird. As Western countries have gotten richer and our lives have become filled with more choice than any other time in human history, you'd expect our happiness to go through the roof. But it hasn't. It's flatlined, or in some cases, even gone down, while things like clinical depression have skyrocketed. So what on earth is going on? All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we need to look at this huge gap between what we think choice does for us and what it actually does. Now look, let's be clear. Nobody is saying choice is a bad thing. It's absolutely essential for a free life. But somewhere along the way, we hit a tipping point, and the sheer volume of it went from being a gift to being, well, a burden. Here's the breakdown, and it's pretty simple. The theory we all operate under is that having more choice equals more freedom. It's liberating. But the reality we're all living in, it's that too much choice doesn't feel like freedom at all. It feels like a kind of tyranny. It doesn't set you free, it just freezes you in place. It leads to paralysis. So what does this tyranny of choice actually look like in the real world? Let's just take a peek at the explosion of options we face every single day. And trust me, some of these numbers are pretty staggering. Okay, picture this. You're doing your weekly shopping and you decide to get some cookies. Simple enough, right? Well, one study found 285 different kinds of cookies on the shelf. 285. How do you even begin to make a decision in the face of that? And it's the same story in every aisle. In that same store, they counted 360 different types of shampoos, conditioners, gels, and mousses. That's nearly a different hair product for every single day of the year. The volume is just, it's absurd. But this is the one that really gets me. At just one electronics store, if you were to mix and match all the available stereo components, the receivers, the CD players, the speakers, you could create over 6.5 million unique systems. That's not a choice, that's a full-time research project. And here's the real kicker. This isn't just about what's in your shopping cart. This problem has seeped into the most important decisions in our lives. We face this same explosion of options in our careers, in our healthcare, and our relationships, even in who we are. Our identity used to be something we mostly inherited, but now it feels like something we have to build from scratch out of a million possible pieces. Now, if you're thinking this all sounds a bit theoretical, it's not. It's been tested. There's this fantastic, famous study where researchers set up a jam-tasting booth in a fancy grocery store. Sometimes they'd offer a small selection, just 6 kinds of jam. Other times, they'd put out a huge display with 24 different varieties. So what do you think happened? Which display actually sold more jam? The results were completely backwards from what you'd expect. Sure, the big display with 24 jams got more people to stop and look. But when it came to actually buying something, the people who saw the small display of 6 jams were 10 times more likely to purchase a jar. 30% of them bought jam, compared to only 3% of the people who saw the huge display. Less choice led to more action. It's wild. So that begs the question, right? Why are we like this? Why do more options lead to fewer decisions? Well, it turns out that how we react to choice overload often comes down to our personality. Generally speaking, we fall into one of 2 camps. You're either a maximizer or a satisficer. Let's see if you can figure out which one sounds more like you. So, a maximizer. This is the person who feels like they have to investigate every single possible option to make sure they're making the absolute objectively best choice. A satisficer, on the other hand, they have a certain standard, a list of criteria, and as soon as they find something that checks the boxes and is good enough, the search is over. You can almost hear the internal monologue. In their head, the maximizer is constantly tormented by the question, is this the best I can do?
What if there's something better out there? The satisficer is just way more chill. They find something that works and they think, yep, this will do the trick, and they move on with their life. And when you look at how these two types of people actually, fare in life, the results are just wow. The research is incredibly consistent. Maximizers, even though they put in all this effort to get the best, are significantly less happy. They're more likely to be depressed, they experience way more buyer's regret, and they're constantly comparing themselves to other people. It's the satisficers, the ones who are okay with good enough, who end up being happier and more content. Okay, but why? Why is trying to get the absolute best of everything so bad for us? Why does this quest so often leave us feeling, well, the absolute worst? It turns out our brains are wired to fall into a few very predictable psychological traps when faced with too many options. It really comes down to this four-part trap. First, there's regret, the nagging feeling you might have made the wrong choice. Then there are opportunity costs. You start thinking about all the great features of the options you didn't choose. This leads to ridiculously high expectations. I mean, with 285 cookies to choose from, one of them has to be perfect, right? And finally, there's endless social comparison. You're constantly looking over your shoulder, wondering if your friend's choice was better than yours. And that first trap, regret, is probably the most toxic of all. There's a great quote from a researcher, Janet Landman, that just nails it. She says that regret is a much bigger threat when there are lots of attractive options. Every single choice you don't make becomes a little ghost that haunts the one you did pick, making it almost impossible to ever feel truly satisfied. All right, so this all sounds a bit depressing, right? We're trapped in a tyranny of choice, maximizing makes us miserable, but don't worry, there is a way out. This isn't a life sentence, so let's get into the practical toolkit, the stuff you can actually do to make happier, more satisfying decisions. So here's the game plan. It starts with just making a conscious decision. Try to be a satisficer more often. Decide what good enough looks like before you start looking, and when you find it, stop. You can even force the issue by just deciding you'll only look at, say, 3 or 4 options. From there, it's about managing your own head. Practice being grateful for what you chose. Actively fight off regret. And this one's huge. Stop comparing your choices to everyone else's. The final and maybe most powerful step, learn to see constraints not as a bad thing, but as a good thing. Learn to love them.
There's a phrase for this whole mess, and it just hits the nail on the head. We are trapped in the tyranny of small decisions. No single choice, which phone to buy, which restaurant to go to, feels like a huge problem on its own. But when you add them all up, day after day, they create this cumulative weight that just drains our energy and our satisfaction with life.
And that brings us all the way back to where we started. We began with the classic idea that more choice equals more freedom. But after looking at all this, maybe we need to flip the question. In a world that's drowning in options, could consciously, deliberately choosing less be the real path to feeling free? It's something to think about.